Welcome everyone. While you're logging in from the platform, I'll go ahead and get started with introductions. I'm Christy Baglow, the Director of Statewide Training at Florida Legal Services, and I am delighted to have with us a great panel today to talk to us about the digital divide, disparities, policy landscape, and implications for elder justice efforts. With me today are Liz Keith, Program Director at Pro Bono Net. Liz has played a key role in Pro Bono Net's program strategy for more than a decade. She joined Pro Bono Net as a law help circuit writer, working with legal aid programs in 25 states to build online resources to increase access to legal help for low-income communities. As program director, Liz now manages strategic initiatives and programs at Pro Bono Net that equip individuals and communities with new tools to tackle civil justice problems. And next up, we have Josh Waldman, Legal Content and Network Support Assistant at Pro Bono Net. Josh joined Pro Bono Net as Legal Content and Network Support Assistant during May and June 2020, with a focus on supporting Pro Bono Net's COVID-19 response efforts. And last but certainly not least, we have Sarah Halsell, State Legal Services Developer at Florida Department of Elder Affairs. Sarah has served as the State Legal Services Developer at the Florida Department of Elder Affairs since 2005. This is a position that's required of each state in the Federal Older Americans Act. The Legal Services Developer provides leadership in securing and maintaining the legal rights of older individuals and plays a key role in assisting states in the development and the provision of a strong elder rights system. So thank you all for being here today. We're going to answer questions at natural pause points during the presentation. So go ahead and enter your questions in the Q&A box as we go along. And the PowerPoint will be shared after the presentation. So thank you all for being here today, and I will hand it over to Liz Keith now.
Great. Thank you so much, Christy, and the Department of Elder Affairs and the Legal Services community co-sponsors of this conference. We are very grateful for the invitation to join you today to discuss this vital topic with perspectives I think we've all gained over the past year in having to find new ways to stay connected and work and engage in our communities through remote mediums and technology. So as Christy said, I'm Liz Keith. I'm the program director with Pro Bono Net, and I'm delighted to be joined by Josh Waldman, who was embedded within PBN last year to assist with our COVID response efforts, including analyzing the impact of the digital divide on access to online tools and services. He also is now an economic policy researcher, and I'll let him share more about his background when we get started. And then also very grateful, as Christy said, to be joined by Sarah Halsell, the State Legal Services Developer at the Florida Department of Elder Affairs. So I think just in terms of our kind of opening context for this session, and we're going to kick things off with Josh in a moment, but as a little bit of background to Pro Bono Net, we are a national nonprofit, and our mission is focusing on bringing the power of the law to all communities through the use of cutting-edge digital tools and strengthening justice networks. And we've had the opportunities to work with the civil legal aid community and elder justice community in Florida on a number of online initiatives over the years, and one of which will be highlighted here. So our roadmap today includes, we're going to kick things off with Josh, who's going to take us through some recent trends kind of during the COVID-19 era in how the digital divide has manifested and what that's meant for older adults. And then we have a segment that I think is really interesting, which is focusing on current policy efforts to close the digital divide, what some of those policies look like, and potential future investments that may create new opportunities or help put in place new resources to better support older adults in accessing and engaging with online services. We'll then pivot from this background that's really centered on the policy landscape and trends to talking about some principles and practices for designing for digital inclusion with older adults in mind. And we'll highlight some examples of programs and models that are working to do that, and then close by spotlighting with Sarah an initiative in Florida that I'm particularly excited about, the Risk Detector Project. And as Christy said, we really welcome your questions and your feedback, your reactions throughout this presentation. We'll pause at the end of the major segments to check for questions and respond to comments. And then we also will leave time at the end to do a deeper dive and have some additional discussion reflecting on the themes and topics that we're spotlighting here. So with that, I'll turn it over to Josh to get us started.
Great. So we're first going to lay out the digital divide across age groups, across race, and between low and high income households. So 22 million American seniors do not have broadband at home. And when we refer to broadband at home, it's basically, we're talking about high quality internet. That's really what we're talking about. And so that's 42% of all seniors compared to just 27% of younger adults, according to a 2021 study from the Humana Foundation. And we also know that 79% of white adults have broadband compared to just 66% of Black adults and 61% of Hispanic adults, according to a recent Pew analysis. And we also know that this is along class lines. Over 9 in 10 adults with household income above $75,000 a year have home broadband, compared to just 56%, a little over half of those with under $30,000 a year in household income. And so we also know that a lot of people who have lost their jobs are going to face a lot of issues affording their internet. And in Florida, this has real implications because seniors have actually had higher unemployment rates in this crisis than in previous crises, and it's actually higher than other groups. So if you can see here, the 65 plus has an unemployment rate almost 16% in April, and you see it hovers above the other groups. So seniors have been hit really hard with unemployment, and they had to deal with all the issues of getting unemployment benefits in a pandemic. And we know that there were unique issues with the Florida system, whether the system was crashing or just having to get online to claim those benefits and confirm that they're still eligible. And so we also know that seniors who disproportionately don't have broadband needed access to the internet to get access to vaccines. And so that's another clear manifestation of how this digital divide that especially affects seniors, low-income households, and Black and Hispanic households, as well as rural households, is really relevant in the elder justice conversation. And so one interesting trend in the COVID era that has had some really powerful implications for what is possible and has some serious limitations based on the digital divide is telehealth. We saw this year millions and millions of people getting care through telehealth. And we saw that insurance systems got more flexible. Medicare got more flexible with telehealth. And so during COVID, as telehealth surged, the digital divide limited the implications for increasing access to healthcare to low-income rural and senior households. And so telehealth increased by over 20 times across groups during the COVID-19 pandemic, according to a RAND study of non-Medicare and Medicaid insurance. So we also know that people with private insurance really increased their telehealth use. And even before COVID, there were problems with having telehealth have as big of a reach with certain populations. Those without English proficiency access telehealth less than half as much as those with English proficiency, according to a health affairs study. So we already know that language access, which is really relevant in the Florida context, is a really, really big barrier to access to telehealth. We also know, however, that the flexibility and the increased access to healthcare that telehealth offered for some may be here to stay. There's a bill in Congress with support from 50 senators to make those emergency flexibility measures permanent in Medicare. And so that could be a really positive thing, especially if paired with powerful infrastructure investments in broadband. And so here we have this really helpful graphic from this RAND study, which is not of Medicare, it's of private healthcare. And so we can see across age group, which is the light blue line at the top, is 46 plus on the left. But even that broader group, that's not just seniors, they access telehealth way more during the pandemic. But then we also see that low-income households accessed it way less. And so for low-income senior households, that's a big problem. And we also see that rural households were able to access telehealth way less, especially during the pandemic, and that it actually reversed trends from before the pandemic, if you look on the right. And so another study found that 26%, just over 1 in 4 Medicare beneficiaries, have neither a smartphone with a data plan nor a computer with home Wi-Fi, according to a paper from the summer of 2020. And so that means they would have a really seriously hard time accessing telehealth or accessing other remote legal services like the ones that Pro Bono Net provides. But we also know that over half of Medicare beneficiaries who are in poverty lack digital access. They have neither a smartphone with a data plan nor home broadband, compared with just 11.5%, just over 1 in 10 Medicare beneficiaries with 400% of the poverty line in household income. So we see this as a clear disparity along both rural versus urban, but also especially low-income households versus high-income households. And so Lifeline, which is the only federal safety net program that basically provides money for low-income households to pay for a phone or internet, is a really important program and one that I'll talk about for a little here. So across the country, Lifeline's impact is blunted because only 27% of all eligible households actually subscribe to Lifeline. So that's less than 1 in 3. But in Florida, that figure is even lower, with just 21% of eligible households subscribing as of April 2021. That's less than 500,000 out of over 2 million eligible Florida households, according to government estimates. So that is a huge gap. And there's different ways of potentially addressing that, from automatically enrolling people who are in a social safety net program to loosening the standards for which providers can participate in Lifeline. But that's a huge problem. Only 1 in 5 eligible households subscribes as of April 2021 in Florida. And we also know that the amount of money that's being spent on Florida Lifeline, that's being given to Florida households to afford internet and phone, fell by half from 2018 to 2020, from roughly 80 million to 40 million in 2020. The overall US Lifeline disbursements fell by much less, a little over a quarter over that same period. And so here we have it. This is the share of Lifeline subscribers in Florida that actually that subscribe out of the households that are eligible. So it's just 1 in 5. And then we have the declining disbursements in Lifeline. And so this is a clear, so that while there's progress with the digital divide, more and more households are getting connected, we're having a clear problem of the only social safety net program that really provides support for low-income households to afford internet is decreasing, and Florida households subscribe to it at a low level. And so there is some progress. And one part of this progress is a very recent program that many of you may know of, the emergency broadband benefit, which was part of the recent stimulus plan. And so that's $50 monthly payments for low-income households to cover internet bills, which is now live. And so that was passed in December 2020, but it's just gone live in about the last few weeks. And it can last until 6 months after the emergency, but it's only funded at $3.2 billion. So if there's strong outreach and if a lot of eligible households, and it has a broad eligibility, sign up, it may not last that long. And so then the American Rescue Plan has $7.2 billion for E-rate, which is the other major program that provides internet access to low-income families, but it's not direct access. It's through funding schools and libraries, internet connectivity efforts through things like hotspots, connected devices, Chromebooks. And so that's a really important program. And we hope to see more of that to extend reach both in Florida and across the country.
Great, thank you, Josh. We're going to transition screens here, so give me one moment while I just share mine. 1 second. Great, thank you. And I just wanted to follow up with one additional comment on Josh's remarks about the Lifeline program and the new emergency broadband benefit. I think one significant difference or change to be aware of is, I believe the Lifeline program offered about a $10 a month supplement for individuals that were eligible to offset the cost of their internet access, whereas the new emergency broadband benefit, as Josh said, is offering $50 a month as a supplement or a discount in getting broadband access. So that's a significant difference. And we'll talk a little bit later in the presentation about ways some programs are promoting the availability of this new benefit, which enrollment just opened for a couple of weeks ago. So feel free to keep the questions coming, or any observations about how any of these trends or statistics may be evidenced in your programs in the last year or so. But we wanted to just round out this section with some interesting data that is pretty recent, just from the last few months, about the current picture of the number of US adults who say they own a smartphone. And this data comes from the Pew Internet and American Life Project, one of the really excellent resources out there to track overall trends in the US of internet usage and adoption and attitudes. And this data comes from Q1 of this year, and found that through the survey that 65 of those 65 plus, 92% own a smartphone, or I'm sorry, 92% of those own a cell phone, but of those, about 60% own a smartphone, and about 30% own a cell phone that isn't a smartphone. So we are seeing good cell phone use and cell phone adoption rates across the 65 plus demographic. I'm sorry, let me just confirm I'm sharing my screen here. Thanks, sorry about that, bear with me 1 second. Okay, great. Are people able to see my screen now? Okay, terrific. Thank you. Sorry about that. So you'll see here those statistics that I was referencing. We're seeing good cell phone adoption among the 65 plus demographic, but a caveat with this statistic and some others that we've shared already and will continue to share is that often the data that's available on technology usage is available in very broad age demographics. So we know that just looking at this through the lens of people who are above 65 misses some important differences across a very diverse age group. But we think that this is a helpful snapshot of what current smartphone and regular cell phone usage looks like. So Josh laid out really well here ways in which I think this past year will be remembered for many things, but one of the side effects of the pandemic has been ways in which, in particular, it's kind of supercharged our reliance on digital tools and digital communication strategies. So in this next section, we're going to drill a little bit more deeply into what that looks like for older adults and some considerations and principles and practices for designing online services and tools through an inclusive lens for older adults. So again, thinking about our first segment in this presentation, we, and I think many of us know that historically the digital divide has been thought of as an infrastructure issue, kind of a last mile connectivity issue that is sometimes thought of as something that primarily impacts rural areas. And we now know through our experience in the past year and some robust new research that's been done since the beginning of the pandemic that access is often more nuanced than that. So of course, it still does include regions that are have limited access as a result of geography or the availability of telecom infrastructure. But it also includes access issues that are the result of affordability or quality of service, whether the broadband access or mode of access that somebody has is reliable and high quality. We also can now look at and move forward in thinking about how to design equitable services through the lens of digital literacy. So having a more nuanced understanding of the familiarity and comfort and skills that might be needed for using online tools to interact with and engage in many of the common kinds of transactions that are needed when receiving or engaging in legal services. So legal document preparation or collaborating with an attorney and advocate. And we also now can begin to see and identify in more nuanced ways the kind of support that might need to be in place to help older adults overcome unique challenges or concerns they might face in accessing services. And then we also look at these issues sort of afresh through the lens of digital inclusion. When we're designing online resources or services for older adults, are they accessible to people with a wide variety of skills, access needs? Do they see their life experiences reflected in the design, visual design and design of services? Is content and information that's available relevant and resonant with their needs? So many of these three categories and access considerations mirror the digital divide that have been experienced by many students who are struggling to connect and participate in online learning. But in this, we'll take a closer look at ways in which they impact, but also can be addressed for services, legal services for older adults. Two additional studies, recent studies we wanted to bring in here that highlight how adoption trends have evolved among older adults during the pandemic include this first one, which is a study that was released by the AARP last month in April 2021. And it was based on a 2021 survey of about 2,000 adults 50 plus. And their it's a really rich study. We have a link to it at the end, and it does in many cases look at technology trend adoption, not just at the 50 plus demographic as a whole, but breaking that down into more incremental age brackets. The study, within the study, about 45% of respondents had incomes under $50,000 a year, and about 20% had incomes under household incomes under $25,000 a year. So that gives you a sense of the income ranges that we're looking at here. But there were three takeaways that I thought were really interesting from this study. The first was this generalized finding that overall, older adults are more positive about the role that technology can play in their lives during and after the COVID-19 pandemic, and recognize ways in which the pandemic, while the pandemic significantly limited social interaction, technology helped facilitate that and helped provide that lifeline for many older adults. And so the second takeaway is that technology use increased across all age groups that this survey looked at. And the largest increases were seen specifically in use of video chat and texting. And then the third kind of interesting takeaway for me here is represented by the chart at the right, which is specifically that increase in adoption of video chat. And so I think in many ways, video chat, whether that's Zoom or FaceTime or other video chat tools, is probably here to stay, a trend that we will see continue in many ways. And this graph on the graph on the right helps to illustrate that dramatic increase in video chat usage just in 1 year. So moving from about 48% of older adults who had used it in 2019, or individuals 60 to 69 who had used it in 2019, to upwards of 73%. And then even in that 70 plus demographic, jumping from 34% who had used video chat to connect with friends and family in 2019 to close to 60% in 2020. The survey also goes into more depth about other ways that video chat is being used by older adults, not just for social interaction, but also ways in which it's being used for access to telehealth and other services. And not surprisingly, some of the top barriers that were cited in this study to tech use and adoption included knowledge gaps, cost, and privacy concerns. Those are all ways in which older adults expressed hesitation to adopt new technology, with cost in ranking number one. The next study, I think, is an interesting counterpoint to this. And this comes from a paper, a piece that was released by the Kaiser Family Foundation in mid-2020, and shows ways in which, while tech has been a lifeline for many older adults who have been isolated during the pandemic, this unprecedented shift to virtual interactions or tech-enabled interactions also has had a downside that I think many of us are familiar with, but some of these points just bring that home in an important, I think, new way. So this piece found that other barriers, in addition to the ones I cited earlier, that can be that can prevent older adults from accessing online services or using those services successfully, include adults experiencing dementia, hearing loss, and impaired vision. And of course, some of these issues overlap with the accessibility needs of people with disabilities. When we think about designing online services, I think one of the lenses we can look at this through is that websites, online applications, and tools that are designed to be accessible to older adults also will be more accessible to people with disabilities, and vice versa. So we're going to go through here some additional, more specific practices and program models that can help use technology and help overcome these gaps. But we wanted to just frame this next segment, I think, with some overarching kind of design principles. And we have seen ways in which the pandemic has really catalyzed and kind of required innovative efforts that many of your programs and your partners have been involved with on multiple fronts. And as we look ahead, we also are now, from Pro Bono Net's standpoint, we're seeing ways in which many of the services that were kind of stood up in emergency, ad hoc, reactive mode, or maybe experimental mode during the pandemic are now beginning to become more permanent fixtures or parts of our civil justice ecosystem. And I think that this moment that we're at in 2021 is a really good opportunity to reflect, for programs to reflect deeply on ways in which, as we move forward, we can incorporate what we've learned from this past year and look at ways that online services can be designed and implemented to best fit seniors' needs, so that as many of them as possible can use and benefit from these services. And similar, I think, to the lens that many of you put on your programs and services, we don't see technology as a panacea. And really, in our work and in our work with justice communities, really try to take a no wrong door approach that centers the person in the design, that the person rather than the system in the design of the service that's being created, and think about ways that there can be multiple supports or multiple access points tailored to the different needs individuals might face, or that take into account different limitations that older adults might face. So again, I think this moment in time and looking forward is an opportunity for the elder justice and legal services community to think creatively and deeply about how to learn from this experience of the past year, and think creatively and deeply about how to design both the technical but also human and relational aspects of our services to ensure that older adults have the tools and support and access to the services they need in the modes that will be most effective to them. So before older adults can start using online services, there are a few fundamental pieces and capacities that need to be in place. And we wanted to just highlight a few here that you may want to consider surveying your client community about, or incorporating into your intake and screening processes in some way to better understand current barriers that older adults might be facing, and how comfortable people are with different types of devices and online services. So the basic ones include: do you have a device to get you online? Do you have internet access? Do you have an email address? Because often an email address is needed to enroll or engage in many services. And then questions to gauge an individual's comfort level and with using certain tools, and ensuring that you're tailoring your engagement to what will work best for them, include: what's the best way for me to get in contact with you? What kinds of tasks are you comfortable doing on a computer? Or what is your preferred way to learn about using this particular type of service? Other practices that we've seen effective, that probably are familiar to many of you from your in-person services, but I think can be adapted in creative and powerful ways to online services, are really intentionally incorporating empathy and use of positive language in online communication, whether that's email or chat or online video webinar type experiences like this one. I think it's also important to acknowledge the learning curve involved with new technology that all of us of any age have experienced, and to try to minimize the feeling of failure that people may experience when products or services just simply aren't designed in a way that makes sense for them. That's not a failure on the part of the individual, that's an issue in how the service was designed. It also can be very helpful to think about having a staff person assigned to offer technical support, or even to create a dedicated help desk for your organization. It's a tech support help desk that is externally facing. And I've talked with a couple of programs recently in other states that are thinking about having this become a role of somebody on their IT team, or looking at the forthcoming expansion of the AmeriCorps Vista program to think about bringing some new capacity into their organizations to help support these kinds of efforts. But a help desk email could help reinforce to individuals that you're open for business and you're there to help them navigate and engage with your online resources across a variety of access points. We also suggest and have seen ways in which keeping written information as simple as possible and using visuals like basic flowcharts about a legal process can really help reinforce and sustain engagement with online systems. And then it's important to have a plan to follow up with a client at each stage of any kind of online interaction, summarizing what was discussed and next steps. Great, I see a couple of questions in the chat box, and we'll pause and come back to those in a moment, but feel free to keep them coming. Other practices that can support inclusion and access in the design of your online services include the use of visual imagery that represents a diverse range of ages and backgrounds, just bread and butter focus and investments in plain language and multilingual content. We also have seen, I think in particular over the past year, reinforcement that even if your services may not be physically open at a particular location, or that may not be the place where people would necessarily come to access services, having a clearly visible physical address for your office and contact information can help reinforce a sense of trust and a sense of accessibility in services that you're offering or advertising through your websites. We saw in some of the data on the previous slides ways in which privacy and concerns about privacy can sometimes be a barrier or create hesitation in older adults accessing online services, and often there are very valid reasons for that. Having plain language and readily accessible privacy and accessibility policies on your website can help mitigate that, or help give users, older adults, an informed understanding of what information might be collected of them in a particular service and how that might be used. And then overall, incorporating accessible design practices into the design of online resources really is critical for older adults, individuals with disabilities, or any other mode of access needs. And that could be a whole series of webinars unto itself. So we've included some resources at the end to help point people in the right direction that are interested in learning more about that. Josh mentioned, and we touched earlier on, the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program. So in terms of access to that, the FCC has put out some really excellent resources and a whole toolkit for programs to help advertise that. I think in the last 2 weeks, there have been about a million people enrolled. That was the stat of a couple of days ago, and enrolled in that program in 2 weeks, which is really encouraging, but a lot more opportunity to get the word out about that. And the materials on the FCC's website make that really easy. And then a couple of other resources and models for programs that are looking ahead and thinking about how some of these macro trends might translate into new resources or new partnership opportunities that you can think about taking advantage of to facilitate access. And there's a question about this in the Q&A box as well. We are starting to see, I think, ways in which some of the federal investments, but also the experience of the last year is leading to new flows of resources, but also new access, training, and partnership opportunities with community anchor institutions like public libraries or schools or healthcare organizations that are thinking anew about their role in bridging digital inclusion. I've seen in a few states now announce new digital inclusion grant programs that are often oriented towards libraries or schools, but there are ways in which I think the elder justice and legal aid community can partner on those efforts and in creative and impactful ways. We've also seen new digital navigator initiatives launch in certain states and certain communities to help support and coach older adults in getting online. And I've been a part of a couple of conversations recently, again, that are thinking about organizations thinking about applying for national service volunteers to help play that role or build that capacity in their programs. There's also new efforts in many states and counties and cities to launch new work groups and task forces focusing on digital equity and inclusion. I included an example here from Palm Beach and Martin counties. And if you're not already plugged into these efforts, they're, I think, worth looking into to see if there is anything getting started in your community that would benefit from having representation from the elder justice community in those forums. And then I think there is a growing interest from private philanthropy as well as the private sector in thinking about their roles in addressing the digital divide and digital inclusion issues. So some of this may take some time to filter out and, before we start seeing some of this come through as new funding proposals or funding opportunities, but certainly something to keep an eye on and be aware of. And then I'll turn this over to Sarah next, but I think that one of the other exciting trends and I think opportunities that Pro Bono Net has seen during the pandemic are ways in which elder justice and legal aid organizations and community partners are thinking about technology to help strengthen human-to-human connections. So thinking about designing technology that can be embedded in community-based networks of care to help legal services organizations and community partners collaborate in new ways to identify, assess, and refer issues, legal issues among older adults. So this slide is obviously not to scale, but we know that the number of nonprofit legal aid organizations and advocates that are serving older adults tends to be far smaller than the number of community-based organizations or healthcare partners that are interacting with them day to day. So as we look ahead, I think this moment in time provides an opportunity to think about how might technology help strengthen partnership and collaboration models across these circles in ways that reach more deeply and help bring new forms of human support into the communities and settings where older adults are located. So I'm going to pause there, and I see one question that I'll maybe try to respond to briefly, and then I'll turn it over to Sarah to talk about the launch of an exciting new project in Florida. But in the question and answer box, Kathy asked, are any of these grants or programs that aim to expand internet access also going to train the elders to use it or provide a device of some sort on which the elders could access the internet? And Catherine, I've definitely seen models that do exactly that. And I would say that generally the programs that I've seen are looking at access not in isolation, not just thinking about what's that point of connectivity or that mode of connectivity, but what is what is the training that's needed to support access, and what are the devices that are needed. And I have seen, I don't know that we have reference in it in the slide deck, but I have seen both grant programs and partnership models that actually are that include the purchase of tablets or other device types that are serving as access points for older adults in accessing services.
And just really quickly, E-rate, the really big increase in E-rate that was recently passed is going to give libraries more opportunity to buy more tablets and equip them with ways to lend out more technology, and could support many of their programs that help older adults with internet issues.
Great point. Great. Okay, so I think, Sarah, I believe you have screen sharing controls now.
Okay. Let's see. I think if I click here, we'll be able to see. Yes, I can confirm that. Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Halsell. I'm the State Legal Services Developer with the Department of Elder Affairs. And I've worked for a lot of years now within the Aging Network to kind of build a bridge between aging and law. And I do that in a lot of different ways, but one of my primary focus points in the work that I do is to improve access to legal services. And, you know, of course, the digital divide is a huge thing to contend with. And it's something that I've been thinking about now for a lot of years. But I'm learning more every day. And even today, I'm learning from Liz and Josh. So thank you for your presentation. I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about some new resources that we have here in Florida. This is a multidisciplinary conference. And so I know the audience is pretty diverse for this. I know we've got a range of folks. I was looking, I have another computer going so I can have my presentation and also see what everyone else is seeing. So I was looking through and just see that there was a lot of you from aging, from legal aid, from different states, even from Attorney General, law enforcement. So that's great. Thanks for being here. And hopefully some of the things that I'll say will land and be relevant to you in your work. So one of the points that I picked up from Liz is just this idea of that there's really three approaches to making sure that we're improving access. Just the access itself to the internet, the literacy, and the inclusion efforts. And so I thought what I could do is also speak to those points and how some of these resources address all three. Just to say right away, with access, we really are building resources here that are not just for seniors, but just based on that last slide that Liz went over, capitalizing on that large circle of caregivers and service providers and faith community and healthcare, and all of the different ways that seniors touch the community, and making sure that not only are seniors equipped, but that their loved ones, their caregivers, the professionals and the advocates in the community who serve seniors, that they're also equipped. So one of the access points that we've worked on of late is the online access point. So most of you hopefully know by now that we have a statewide senior legal helpline in Florida. It has been around since 2005. It's been supported by the Department of Elder Affairs since 2007. It is a very well integrated part of our legal services delivery system, and continues to be a very accessible point of entry into the delivery system. And yet it has never had an online home. And so this new website of Florida Department of Elder Affairs provides an online home for the Senior Legal Helpline. So we think this will help seniors get the information that they might be looking for if they are online. If they're not online, maybe their children, their caregivers, people like that. So you can see right away, it says the online resource. It's for Florida older adults, their advocates, and their caregivers. So I'm just going to go through this website just a little bit and show you what is here, and then spend some time talking about our newest tool, which is the Florida Elder Law Risk Detector, which we believe really is a hybrid of merging that human-centered, person-centered touch point with technology to best serve seniors. So like I said, it's the online home for the Florida Senior Legal Helpline. If you go to floridaelderlaw.org, it will redirect you. It used to just land there, but now because it's a resource of the department, it will redirect you to law.elderaffairs.org. So either way, you're going to get to this site. I think floridaelderlaw.org is easy. So if you go there, and you'll see we're trying to accomplish a few things with this website. One is to provide information about different legal services that are available. We want to provide a range of legal information. There are other places in Florida to access legal information. We also felt like there is an opportunity here to share information relevant to seniors, particular hot topics. And a lot of this information comes from our Florida Senior Legal Helpline. They're developing information that they send home to their clients with their closeout letters. So that information is also located here. We also want to make sure that advocates and caregivers are provided resources that are tailored to them. And really those are the three things we're trying to accomplish with this website. One of the other things that I learned today, thinking about those three different prongs, is that inclusion piece. And so I'm happy to say, and I did not even become aware of this until I was looking at the site last week. This is, like I said, it's very new. And there will even be some changes made from what's here today. But if you see this wheel over here and you click on it, I believe that the conference has something similar to this, although it's not a wheel, it's like a person, tiny little icon in the top right. You'll see some accessibility adjustments, and maybe a lot of you are familiar with these kinds of things on sites. I was not. And so I'm really thrilled to say that our new website does have some of these accessibility adjustments for folks to be able to access, whether they have vision impairments, ADHD, for blind users. So there's a range of things. And so I invite you to click on these things and to learn a little bit about these accessibility adjustments. Okay, so legal services, you'll see the Florida Senior Legal Helpline. That's where the legal information is there about that resource. Local legal services partner organizations. It requires a little bit of finagling there. And then additional resources, which is like Florida Law Help, the ABA Florida Law Answers, some of those resources that are available. So if you're not familiar, go ahead and do some clicking around here to become familiar with these resources. Legal information, like I said, there's just several different things here, and we will be keeping these up to date and add to. But today I primarily want to talk about the Florida Elder Law Risk Detector. And it is located here and is a resource for advocates and caregivers. So it's here, but it's also just on its own because we don't want anyone to miss it. I primarily added it to this main menu bar because if you're on the mobile site, which obviously a lot of people are accessing the internet these days by their phone, you can click, you won't see necessarily the bar, you have to kind of click on menu. So it just makes it that much more prominent. So if you click on Florida Elder Law Risk Detector, what we have here is a whole toolkit of resources. So we have the access to the risk detector itself, okay? We have recorded training. So just a 45-minute presentation. I would invite you all to show this training to people that you come into contact with, whether it be coworkers or people that you're responsible for training on different resources available. So it's there and available. And also, if you want to make the training personal, there's training slides. You can adapt those to your use. There's a handbook for legal aid providers. There is a fact sheet, and even an FAQ on different data issues that come up when we're talking about online tools and just, answering questions about privacy and that kind of thing. If you click on the risk detector, it will take you to a Pro Bono Net site. And so right away, I want to say that we developed this in partnership with Pro Bono Net. And really what I should say is that we adapted it from another risk detector, elder law risk detector, that was originally developed in another state with the help of Pro Bono Net. So we have been working with Liz Keith and Pro Bono Net over the last couple of years to create the Florida elder law risk detector. And we are continuing to have a conversation about how to develop this resource. So I would love your feedback. As I go through, please let me know your questions, and you can always reach me after the session and reach out to me to talk to me about your experience in using it, any questions you have, etc. But what this risk detector is a screening tool to help advocates and service providers in the community. So think of anybody really. Anyone who's in a position to help a senior identify a legal need. Okay, it's really important that we all feel equipped to not know all of the resources that are available, but to be able to know how to find them. And this risk detector takes the guesswork out of what questions to ask to help identify a legal need. Okay, when we're asking community partners to identify needs and make referrals, we're not asking you to become attorneys, and we're not asking you to be able to issue spot in a complex problem or set of problems that a senior is facing. So what this risk detector does is it provides a guided interview, a guided way for you to go through a series of legal issues with the senior that you're working with to identify the need, and then it makes a referral to the legal services provider. So in terms of the digital divide, I think what it does is it helps provide access for seniors who may not have access to the internet. Okay, but they have a trusted person, someone in their life who can help them. Okay, and so right away, I think it helps address that access point. In terms of literacy, even if a senior has access to the internet, they may not feel comfortable accessing the internet. And so one thing I should say is that there's a lot of ways to access legal services in Florida, okay? And we're not trying to direct anyone to one resource alone, but we want to make sure that we're understanding that different people have different vulnerabilities and different strengths. And this resource in particular is really good as an access point for people who want help accessing the service. Some seniors, giving them the phone number to the senior legal helpline, or giving them the website floridaelderlaw.org, or just telling them to look up their local legal aid provider. They can do that comfortably. They can do that well. For other seniors, they're not as comfortable with doing that. And for those that don't have that literacy aspect down for the online world, this is a way to kind of bridge that gap and help a senior get where they need to be. In terms of inclusion, I've already kind of said that it helps a senior in a way that's it's just very personal, and it meets their individual needs in terms of identifying the issues and getting them where they need to be. So when you get to this page, again, starting at floridaelderlaw.org and clicking on risk detector, then you come here and click begin interview with client. And there's instructions here to make sure that everyone knows, the senior in particular, that this is a voluntary process, that there are multiple ways to access legal services. They do not have to access legal services this way, but it is a easy way, a accessible way to get the help that they need. There's going to be another opportunity for the senior to consent to have their information sent to legal services at the end of the interview. So just, a couple of places where we really emphasize the voluntariness of this. Okay, when you click next, this is where the advocate or the service provider puts in their information. And this is really key because we want that person who's helping the senior kind of get information back about the success of the referral. And so if you are filling this out on behalf of the senior, you would put your name, you would put your email address and your agency, and because you put in your email address, you will get an email back saying the referral has been sent, and it will give you a copy of the risk report and the referral. So we want to make sure that when you're testing this, and please feel free to test this, this is the best way to learn what the risk detector is and how to use it, is to actually use it. And when you do so, we just ask that you keep that pre-populated language there, like John Doe, Jane Doe, etc. And that way, when legal aid gets the referral, they'll know to disregard it. Okay. Just a couple more things I want to show you, because for time's sake, I don't want to go through every single thing. I just mainly want to show you that the accessibility of this particular tool. In Florida, we have 2 pathways, and I'm excited to say we're going to be starting to explore a 3rd pathway, which will be specific to residents of long-term care. So I'll be meeting with Liz to discuss feasibility of this. And that's what I mean as we're continuing to develop this. We think it's such a good tool. So think about the people who really probably suffer from this digital divide the most. I'm certain that, it'd be interesting to see, but long-term care residents are right at the top of that list. And yet we have long-term care ombudsmen, we have other service providers who are regularly in the lives of these people and can help them get legal services. And this is a great tool to do that. So for the purpose of time, I'm just going to do express, but just know that the standard pathway still focus, they both focus on 5 main areas of law. The standard pathway goes a little bit more in depth, and it allows upload of documents and it allows upload of photos. So that can be really helpful in a referral, but it's certainly not necessary. When we click here, begin assessment, this is where the client's information goes, and we're going to leave all the pre-populated language. But like I said, on your own time, peruse this if you're not familiar with this resource to see what types of questions we're asking. In terms of making sure that we're, being inclusive, we want to make sure that we're acknowledging that there might be better times than others to call the senior back. There's a question about if they have trouble talking or communicating by phone, what are some things that we need to be aware of? And so these are all ways that we're attempting to meet clients where they're at. One of the required questions, and like I said, use the pre-populated information, but you do have to select your county because this determines where it goes. So I'll just click Alachua right at the top. That it will tell you who your legal partner is and where the referral will be going. And for this referral, we'll be going to 3 Rivers Legal Services in Alachua. Down at the bottom, I want to make note of this question. Do you have any communication challenges? That's the one I raised before. And then it asks another question, rent or own, and that is important because it determines which questions are asked in the housing section. The Express, which we picked for the purposes of time, has all the questions on one page. And again, I can't go into it, but just to point out that there's 5 main areas of law. And then there's, of course, the other category, so that we don't leave anything out, whatever the senior feels like they need to communicate. But there's lots of questions about housing. We have consumer debt and other income issues, financial exploitation, I'm just going to click a couple of things. When you can see when I click it, it brings up this box. Please provide any additional detail. I just had a correspondence from a constituent where they're a social worker and they work in a nursing home, and they have a patient who wants to revoke a power of attorney, wants to execute a new power of attorney. And she's reaching out to Department of Elder Affairs. How do I help the senior do that? So it's like, no, this would be a great tool for her to have known about to make that referral to legal services. Healthcare concerns, abuse and neglect, and then, like I said, other. When you click on next, it gives you an opportunity to review, and it shows you the red flags that pop up, and you can say, I'm satisfied with these inputs. And then again, that disclaimer that I mentioned. So we'll say, yes, you have our permission, and this will go to Three Rivers as soon as I click yes. And so you'll see this is the final page, and this risk report has now been emailed to you as the service provider advocate who's helped the senior get them where they need to be. And you can share that with the senior. Then it will go to legal services and it will be reviewed. And then I just want to, kind of give you a couple minutes of what to expect with this referral once it has gone. Okay, so, oops. Give me 1 second. I want to make sure I don't leave anything out. Okay, so once the referral is received by legal services, what happens is that an intake specialist from legal aid will call the senior back. We'll always try to call a minimum of 2 times, sometimes 3. It depends on the provider and what their capacities are. And they will do so within about 2 business days. Again, that standard may vary depending on the capacity of the provider, but that's approximate. Once the intake specialist reaches the senior, they will complete an application for services. So there may be reasons why the senior is not eligible for their services. And it could be based on income. It could be based on their priority or their legal issue not being a priority of the provider. It may be that, like, for instance, they don't have a civil legal issue. They have something that's different than that, criminal or such. And just to know that there's varying levels of funding at legal aid. And so, we don't want to make assumptions about whether they would be eligible or not. That's what the intake specialist is for. So we don't get into that too much in this application. There is a question that asks about income, but all of that will be worked out at the intake by the intake specialist. And if there is an instance where the legal aid program cannot take the senior's case, potentially there's a conflict, they will be told the reason, and they will be provided with other resources. So for example, if they're not eligible based on their income, they will be referred to the Florida Bar Lawyer Referral Service. If they're not eligible because they have an issue that's outside of their priority, they will help them find a legal resource that might be able to assist. So the main point is understanding that legal aid can't handle every case. It is a limited resource, but when in doubt about what legal aid can and can't do for the people that you serve, make the referral and let legal services kind of go over what they can and can't do with that particular client. Okay, I think just because there's not that much time left in the session, I know Liz has a couple more slides and I want to make sure there's time for questions. I'm going to leave that here. And just, quickly, how you can help. These are a lot of resources that are new. This website is new. The risk detector is new. We would love your help in getting the word out. So there's a fact sheet. You can print it. You can email it. You can post it on your website. You can train potential users. So if you're in a position to be doing outreach in your community, you can train users on accessing this tool and using it. And then, just to tell people about the website, because there's a lot of information on all of these resources at floridaelderlaw.org. So thank you. And I'm going to go stop sharing and answer questions.
Great, thank you, Sarah. I'm not seeing any questions on the risk detector at the moment, but please feel free to send any through in the next several minutes. And as Sarah said, we've had the opportunity to collaborate on co-designing the risk detector and adapting it to Florida. And while the tool was kind of incubated and originally developed in another state, I have to say there are ways in which Sarah and the legal services organizations and community partners that have given input into this have really expanded and enhanced the design of the tool in ways that make it more inclusive and comprehensive, that we're now sharing out and bringing into our work with other states that are just starting to adopt it now. So really excited about the potential of the tool in Florida, and look forward to supporting it in the coming months. So I'm just going to wrap up with a couple of additional resources and examples that we wanted to share. And I will go ahead and share my screen again. And I wanted to, great. Does everybody see my screen now?
Good.
Okay, great. So just in response to Catherine's question earlier about examples of programs that are not only expanding access, but also thinking through the training and device needs of seniors. I'll send a link through the chat box as well in a moment, but one that just came to mind while Sarah was presenting is a program that has been launched in California and the Austin, Texas area by the Community Technology Network. And it essentially it's funded by philanthropic funders, but also some private companies and businesses that are interested in, as part of their social impact missions, helping older adults get online. And it trains volunteers to work with homebound seniors in getting online, and also sponsors the purchase and use of devices. So this is just one of many models that are out there that kind of couple the access and literacy and support needs. So I'll share a link to that through the chat if anybody's interested in taking a closer look at that model or that curriculum. Also, just some additional resources here that are, the first slide is geared a little bit more towards the legal services community, but there are reference to some of the studies that we mentioned, a really excellent series that Josh wrote last year focusing on some of these digital divide trends. If you're looking for just some sort of starter content or reference to incorporate into funding proposals, many of the resources here will be a good starting point. And then there's also some really good just practitioner-oriented tools and resources that have been created by the National Center for Law and Elder Rights and the National Center for State Courts and others that have been looking at digital divide issues. And then some specific resources focusing on designing senior-friendly websites and tools and applications come from several articles that are listed here. We also linked to that extensive report that Josh cited early on that was done by the Humana Foundation and Oaths, looking at trends in the digital divide during the pandemic among older adults. And I also linked here to some resources for programs that are interested in exploring digital navigator initiatives. I think that the last thing we'll say, and then I see a question for Sarah here. But the last thing I'll say is again, I think we are starting to see some renewed interest and some renewed investment in digital divide and digital access programming, a lot of which is being driven by libraries and schools. I think particular particularly public libraries are a really promising partner for this community. They are endeavoring to serve older adults as part of their core missions in the same way that everybody here is. So there's a natural alignment in thinking about partnership models or beginning those conversations, and if they're not already started, and thinking about ways that this community can plug into those efforts. So I think there was one question here that was asking, is there a minimum age requirement to use the risk detector?
So yes, I answered the question, but just to let everyone know that there is no barrier to using it for any age. I mean, of course, it's intended to refer seniors. And I could see that it could be a really helpful tool to refer other vulnerable adults. And there are, like I said, there are no barriers to referring someone who is not 60 years of age and older. So, so hopefully that answers your question. And just to know too that the legal aid programs where the referrals go are all full service legal aid law firms that receive multiple funding from various sources. And so they serve all ages. They also receive Older Americans Act funding to serve seniors 60 years of age and older. And that's what this tool was set up to address. But like I said, it will work the way it's supposed to work for any age.
Thank you all for all that great information, and thank you to everyone who attended. I just wanted to remind everyone to fill out the quick survey at the end of your sessions. And at 3:45, you've got choices between the Florida legislative update or defending nursing home evictions. So we hope to see you at one of those at 3:45. Thank you so much to Liz, Josh, and Sarah. Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Have a good one.